welcome to this deep dive. We've gathered a bunch of recent sources, all pointing towards some pretty big moves in the AI world.
Yeah, lots happening.
And our job, like always, is to cut through all that noise and pull out what really matters for you.
It definitely feels like AI is evolving incredibly fast right now. And these articles, they give us a really interesting glimpse across, well, several different areas at once.
Exactly. So today we're going to unpack how AI is sort of quietly weaving itself into the tools you probably use daily.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look at some, frankly, intriguing technical steps forward with new models.
Yeah, some efficiency gains there.
And then there are these big deals happening. AI companies and content creators trying to figure things out.
Right. The whole licensing question.
And finally, we'll touch on the growing focus on, how these powerful AI companies are actually structured and maybe regulated.
It's quite a range, isn't it? From your personal inbox right up to major corporate strategy and government oversight.
Okay, let's dive in then, starting with something that could genuinely appear, well, right at the top of your inbox.
Ah, yes, Gmail.
One report we looked at talks about Google's Gemini getting a bit more proactive within Gmail.
That's right. Google's rolling out these email summary cards, Gemini powered. They'll just show up at the top of email threads.
Okay, summary cards got it. But what's the big deal here?
Well, the significant thing, according to the source, is the shift away from you having to click a button, to ask for a summary. Now, Gemini is going to automatically generate them when it thinks it's needed. No prompt required from you.
Automatically.
Nice.
Seriously. So you open some long, messy email chain and just, bam, there's a summary.
Pretty much, yeah. When Gemini first appeared in that Gmail side panel last year, summarizing was something you had to, actively choose to do.
Right, I remember that.
So this update, it marks a real move towards the AI kind of working on its own within your inbox.
Okay, but here's where I get a little, maybe, hesitant. Based on other things we've seen.
Like the reliability issues.
Exactly. The article points this out too. AI summaries aren't always, let's say, perfect. It mentioned how Apple tried AI summaries for news notifications.
Oh yeah, and the BBC found they were just full of errors.
Full of errors. Apple actually had to pause that feature for news apps because of it.
And, let's be honest, Google's own AI overviews in search have had their moments too. Sometimes inaccurate, sometimes just odd.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it really highlights this tension, doesn't it? This push to deploy AI everywhere because it's convenient versus the fact that it still makes mistakes.
It's a balancing act, and it's happening in real time.
So back to these Gmail cards. The source says Gemini will list key points from the email, and it even updates the summary if new replies come in.
Which is clever. And Google does say this automatic feature won't totally kill the manual click option. That's still there if you prefer it.
Okay, that's good. And what about the rollout? Is this everywhere?
Not quite yet. Initially, it's just for English emails. And interestingly, depending on where you are, these summaries might be on or off by default.
Yeah. How so?
Well, Google's own help documents apparently say that in places like the EU, the UK, Switzerland, Japan, these smart features are off initially.
You can turn them on.
Yeah, you can flip the switch yourself in Gmail settings. And for businesses using Workspace, the administrators have controls too. They can manage those personalization settings for their users.
Right. So a definite step towards more automatic AI in a daily tool, but caveats apply. Known flaws, user controls, regional differences.
Precisely. It gives a good sense of how AI is impacting those day-to-day workflows.
Okay, so that's the user-facing side. Let's pivot a bit to the tech itself. We saw some really interesting stuff about a new AI model from a lab called DeepSeek.
Yes, DeepSeek. They released an updated, bigger reasoning model, R1 it's called, got some buzz.
Yeah.
But what caught my eye in one of the sources was actually another release from them, a much smaller, what they're calling a distilled version.
Distilled? What does that mean in, AI terms?
It basically means they've taken the knowledge or the abilities of a much larger, more complex model and sort of compressed it down into a smaller package.
Okay. And why is that interesting?
Well, the claim in the source is pretty bold. This smaller model apparently outperforms models of a similar size on certain specific tasks.
Really? Like what?
For instance, it reportedly did better than Google's Gemini 2.5 Flash on a specific math test, the AME 2025 questions.
Wow. Okay.
And it also got remarkably close to Microsoft's new 5.4 reasoning model on another math benchmark, HMMT.
That's genuinely impressive for something they're calling smaller. How does that work? Less capable overall, but better on specifics.
Well, yeah, generally speaking, distilled models usually aren't as, broadly capable or versatile as the big ones they come from.
Right.
But what they gain is huge efficiency. They need way less computing power to actually run.
Ah, okay. Efficiency.
And the source gives a really stark comparison. The full-size R1 model needs serious kit, like a dozen high-end GPUs, 80 gigs of memory each, just to run.
Oh, okay, that's massive.
But the smaller distilled one, which, by the way, they built using Alibaba's Qwen 38B model as a base, it only needs a single GPU with maybe 40 to 80 gigs of RAM.
Wow. That is a massive difference in hardware requirements. That makes it so much more accessible, right? Cheaper to run.
Exactly. It could run on much more common, less expensive machines.
So how did they actually, make the small one from the big one? What's the process?
They trained this smaller model, the DeepSeek R10528 Qwen 38B, using text that was actually generated by the big R1 model.
Okay.
They took that high-quality output and used it to fine-tune the base model, the
Wow.
Qwen 38B. You can kind of think of it like a student learning by studying the best examples from a master teacher.
Got it. Clever. And who is this smaller model aimed at? Who's supposed to use it?
According to DeepSeek themselves, they put notes on their Hugging Face page, which is, a big hub for sharing AI stuff.
Right. Yeah.
They say it's meant for both academic research on reasoning models and industrial development focused on small-scale models.
So researchers and businesses looking for efficient AI.
Exactly. And crucially, they released it under a permissive MIP license, meaning anyone can basically use it commercially, no strings attached, and you can already access it through APIs, the software interfaces via different platforms like LM Studio and others.
Okay, so the big takeaway here seems to be this push towards making powerful AI reasoning smaller, more efficient, easier to run, lowering that hardware barrier.
Absolutely. It's about democratizing access, really.
Yeah.
Making it possible to deploy these kinds of smarts more widely, maybe even, on devices closer to the end user eventually.
Interesting. Okay, so from code and efficiency, let's shift gears again. Let's talk content and deals. We saw news about a pretty major agreement between a big publisher and a tech giant.
Ah, yes. The New York Times and Amazon signing an AI licensing deal.
Right. Which is, well, it's particularly interesting, isn't it? Because it comes less than 2 years after the Times sued OpenAI and Microsoft.
A very high-profile lawsuit, yeah. Alleging copyright infringement for training their models.
So what exactly does this new deal with Amazon cover? What content are they licensing?
So the agreement gives Amazon a license to use the Times' editorial content, specifically for training Amazon's AI platforms.
Okay.
The Times said it's about bringing their content into a variety of Amazon customer experiences. That includes news articles, stuff from their cooking section, and also content from The Athletic, which the Times owns.
And where might we, as users, actually see this Times content popping up via Amazon's AI?
Well, the companies mentioned Amazon's Alexa software on smart speakers as one possibility.
Oh, okay.
And the Times spokesperson also clarified that wherever it sort of makes sense within Amazon products, they plan to provide direct links back to the Times' own sites, to encourage people to go there for the full story.
Right, driving traffic back. It's such a contrast, though. Suing some big AI players, cutting a deal with another one. Did they say how much the deal was worth?
No, the financial terms weren't disclosed in the report we saw, but it is the first big AI licensing deal like this that Amazon has signed.
First for Amazon. Okay.
And the Times spokesperson basically doubled down on their position, saying, they have this long-standing approach to ensure that our work is valued appropriately.
Either through deals.
Whether through commercial deals or through the enforcement of our intellectual property rights. Exactly.
Right. And just to remind ourselves, that lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft, the core claim was they used millions of Times articles for training without permission or payment.
That was the heart of it, yes. And both OpenAI and Microsoft have obviously contested those claims, but the Times has been very consistent about protecting its IP in this new AI era.
So this Amazon deal, it sounds like it's the Times' first publicly announced generative AI licensing agreement. Right. Though we've seen others, right? Other publishers making deals.
Yeah, absolutely. Other big names like the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Guardian, they've made similar deals, often, interestingly, with OpenAI.
So it really shows how these content companies are trying to navigate this, tricky landscape.
It's complex. Some are going the legal route, litigation. Others are negotiating licenses. It really underlines how valuable publishers think their curated content is for training these AI models.
Yeah, that seems to be the big picture here. That high-quality curated data is a really valuable commodity for AI development.
And the tech companies seem increasingly willing to pay for it through these formal deals, even while those legal fights over past training data are still ongoing.
So, connecting this forward, maybe we're seeing a shift away from just scraping the web for training data towards a future where accessing premium content for AI involves more structured, paid agreements.
It certainly points in that direction, a potential future model, yeah.
Okay, one last area to cover. Let's look at the regulatory side, the structure of these AI companies. We saw a report focusing on Delaware's Attorney General and OpenAI.
Yes, the Wall Street Journal reported on this. Delaware's AG is taking a pretty significant step. They're actually hiring an investment bank.
An investment bank.
Why? To get independent advice specifically about OpenAI's plan to convert to a for-profit company.
Right, because OpenAI is incorporated into Delaware, isn't it?
Exactly. So they need approval from state regulators there to make this change happen.
And the goal of changing to for-profit is?
Well, the idea is it makes it easier for OpenAI to raise more investment money and maybe eventually go public.
Okay.
Become a publicly traded company.
Okay. And OpenAI and Microsoft, they already have their own advisors on this, right?
Yes, they've both hired their own investment banks. So the Delaware AG is essentially seeking a separate, independent assessment.
And what's the AG specifically looking at? What's the concern?
According to the report, they seem really focused on figuring out the fair value, the equity stake, basically that OpenAI's original nonprofit entity should get or keep in the new for-profit structure.
Ah, so making sure the nonprofit part gets its fair share in the transition.
Pretty much. And this independent evaluation, well, it could potentially slow things down or complicate OpenAI's timeline for making this switch.
Why is valuing that nonprofit stake so important? What's the implication?
Well, corporate governance experts quoted in the source suggest this valuation could really affect the price OpenAI effectively has to pay to simplify its, frankly, quite complex structure.
Right, it's got that cap profit thing going on.
Exactly. And they even mentioned, interestingly, that Elon Musk's huge, though rejected, takeover bid for OpenAI last year, that $97.4 billion offer might have sort of accidentally set a higher benchmark for what that nonprofit value could be considered in this whole calculation.
That raises a really fundamental point, doesn't it? How do regulators even begin to assess and oversee the value of these organizations that started with, a nonprofit mission, but are turning into these massive, incredibly valuable commercial giants?
Absolutely. They're figuring it out as they go, essentially. How do you structure and oversee something that's evolving so incredibly quickly and holds so much potential power and market value? It's a huge challenge.
Okay, wow. We've definitely covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
We kicked off with AI getting more automatic, maybe, in your Gmail.
The proactive summaries.
Then explored DeepSeek's clever approach to making powerful AI smaller and more efficient, needing less hardware.
The distilled models, yeah.
Then we discussed the whole complex dance of content licensing, with the New York Times striking a deal with Amazon while still suing others.
Navigating that value proposition.
Okay, we finished up looking at the regulatory side, with Delaware scrutinizing OpenAI's move towards a more conventional for-profit structure.
It's really clear when you put these pieces together, isn't it? How AI is just charging ahead on so many different fronts all at once.
Yeah, impacting your personal tools, pushing the technical limits, reshaping industry deals, and attracting serious attention from regulators.
It's a multifaceted evolution, for sure.
And digging into these sources, pulling out these key insights, that's exactly what this deep dive was designed to help you do, stay on top of this incredibly fast-moving space.
So, thinking about all these trends we've just discussed, AI acting more on its own in your tools that push for smaller, deployable models that could run almost anywhere, the content companies making these strategic deals for their data, and the regulators stepping in to examine the very structure of the big players.
Yeah.
What does that whole picture maybe suggest to you about how your own personal interactions with AI might shift in the near future? And maybe more importantly, what critical questions should these trends make you ask about that changing relationship?